Hey everyone, I'm Mariana, and Smile 2 was a sequel I was actually really looking forward to. I love a good curse movie, and the original Smile, though not perfect, was a solid horror film. It was creepy, it was dark, it was effective, and it had a pretty insane ending I respected. It's also a concept you can do so much with and take it in pretty much any direction. Well, Smile 2 promised to go bigger in every way, which it did, but did bigger mean better in this case? Let's talk about it. The movie is about a pop star, Sky Riley, who is gearing up for a comeback tour after a tragic accident. The Smile trauma curse finds her when she's already struggling with pain and personal demons, as well as the pressures of fame, so it's not long until Sky is feeling overwhelmed by the escalating horrors and her life begins spiraling out of control. This is an interesting one to discuss because I think there are going to be plenty of people who are going to prefer the sequel to the original. For me though, this movie was fine. It's not a bad sequel and it's not a bad horror film, but it's not amazing either, which is sad because I really wanted to love it. And I'm going to get into all of the pros and cons, but my main issue here is that it just didn't feel like it added anything new. I am sure that based on this premise of focusing the sequel on a troubled celebrity, you have a movie in mind, some obvious basic things that you assume they would do with that idea and with a bigger budget, considering what we already know about the curse from the first film. I assure you that the movie you imagined is pretty close to the movie we got here because mostly it takes the first Smile and gives you more of the same stuff. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not effective. Smile 2 is definitely still very creepy and pretty dark. It also steps up the gore, and there's definitely plenty of disturbing imagery involved, so if that's the main thing you want out of the sequel, you're going to get what you came for. If you're just hoping they go bigger with the mind games and with the scares, and you're into the more polished look you saw in the trailer, you're going to have a great time. They also found some fun ways to incorporate dark humor, which was really entertaining, although at certain points the absurdity of the situation and the humor itself took away from the horror a little bit. But for the most part, I would say that the horror elements work, particularly if you don't mind jump scares. I'm not the biggest fan of jump scares, but I have to admit they got me multiple times, and they're not false scares either, so I can't even be mad. Visually, it's a really good looking film. They use some of the same camera movements from the original, but they take them further. There are some great long takes that ramp up the intensity, and of course, the production design itself and the costumes are a lot more elaborate simply because of the setting. I also have to praise the cast. I think all of the performances were great. It's a very well cast movie with some excellent creepy smiles, but Naomi Scott in particular is fantastic as the lead. I was so impressed by her performance because the film relies on how demanding this role is physically and emotionally. I mean, how many bottles of Voss can you even chug? Jokes aside, she is the biggest reason this movie works as well as it does, and Sky as a character goes through a lot as she's desperately trying to keep it together. Not a single person around her, including her own mother, is willing to take her seriously, partly because of her history of substance abuse, or care about anything other than her career and the tour, except for her childhood friend Gemma. And it's one thing losing your mind privately like Rose did in the first movie, and it still was awful and isolating. But here we have a character with all eyes on her who is expected to act a certain way in public, and losing it publicly has very different implications for Sky compared to Rose. Obviously, this adds even more drama to the situation, but on the other hand, because Sky is a lot less relatable than someone like Rose, a lot of this ends up giving you secondhand embarrassment more than the first film, which is something I didn't expect. But while all of this sounds great, here's something Smile 2 used way too much: fake outs. If you've been watching me for a while, you already know I do not like fake outs. This is something that can be done well. Smile actually used this very effectively, partly because they used it sparingly, but with the sequel, they go completely overboard. Now, because this curse is messing with the victim's head, and because these people are essentially battling the darkest corners of their own minds, it makes sense that as time goes on, they get more and more disconnected from reality. But there is a balance that needs to be maintained to keep tricking the audience into believing what they're seeing is real, while also using the trope effectively. With Smile 2, the further into the movie you get, the easier it is to tell what's real and what's not. And because these fake outs kept happening more and more, I personally got to a point where I was annoyed by them and they lost any kind of ability of generating suspense for me. It also made me think of one of my all-time favorite movies, Black Swan, which uses the whole "is this even real" thing extremely well. And there are actually some similarities in general between Smile 2 and Black Swan, if you think about it, except Black Swan does all of this a lot better, and it is a completely unfair comparison. But my point is that when the movie is relying too much on making the audience question if what they're watching is actually happening, it stops being effective and starts feeling repetitive. This is exactly where bigger doesn't mean better. And that also applies to going bigger with the character and the stakes to an extent. On one hand, it was interesting to see a completely different situation and a completely different person dealing with the curse. But on the other hand, I actually missed the intimacy of the first Smile. That movie just felt more personal. Maybe if Smile 2 actually had something new to offer as far as the mythology goes, or tried something new instead of just going bigger, I would have felt differently. But as is, I felt more disconnected from the story in the sequel. This also gets into the discussion about originality and the overall mainstream feel of this movie. I actually thought we started off strong here, with the first act providing a solid setup for the rest of the story and even some surprises early on. But as soon as Smile 2 hit the second act, it became repetitive, it became predictable, and kind of started dragging, as it was covering a lot of familiar ground as well as reiterating what we already knew. I thought the movie overstayed its welcome overall. It felt too long, but the middle section in particular felt very obvious, playing out exactly as you would expect, and generally playing it safe, which made it drag even more. This sequel just doesn't feel fresh, and by the time it got to the third act, I no longer felt as invested in the story and the characters as I was in the beginning. And maybe I'm just spoiled this year with great horror because we've had so many movies this year subverting genre tropes and audience expectations, pushing the genre forward, doing interesting things with structure and editing. Meanwhile, this movie feels very traditional and mainstream. And once again, for some people, this is going to be a good thing because that's the type of horror they like, as long as it's effective. But personally, I walked away generally feeling whelmed. Not overwhelmed, not underwhelmed, just whelmed. Smile 2 is undoubtedly a technically well-made and well-shot horror movie that takes what worked about the original and doubles down on it, while also raising the stakes for the main character. The performances are great, with Naomi Scott absolutely killing it, the gore is intense, and the dark sense of humor adds some much-needed levity to this otherwise depressing story. But unfortunately, Smile 2 doesn't have much else to add to what we already know about the curse or to how it manifests in its victims, instead opting to play things safe, relying way too much on fake outs and jump scares. It left me wishing there was more to it, wishing that instead of just going bigger, the movie actually went further into the mythology and the mind games, finding new ways to torment the characters and the audience. Not to mention, the trailers gave away most of the plot and most of the scares anyway. All that being said though, I would watch another sequel, hoping it would explore things further. But most importantly, remember, if people start acting weird while smiling aggressively at you, don't be like the characters of this movie and just stand there watching them be violent. Confuse the demon, smile back, and get out.